Does this make it easier or more difficult to sail? What do you think? This is Olija, developed by Skeleton Crew Studio and published by Devolver Digital. Olija is a pixel art side-scrolling action platformer. In Olija, you play as Lord Faraday, marooned in a strange land with his ship crew missing and no way to leave. Early in the game, you discover a magic harpoon that is somehow tied to the evil black goo infecting the land. The game then sees you travelling to different islands in search of your crew and defeating ancient evils plaguing the land along the way. Much of the gameplay revolves around the magic harpoon. Faraday can embed the harpoon in enemies and certain environmental objects and then teleport to the harpoon's location. This can make for some fun traversal puzzles and really gives combat a dynamic feeling as you zip about from enemy to enemy. Combat is further supplemented with the use of secondary weapons like a rapier or a bow. Faraday can also combo with melee weapons, and tilting in different directions can lead to different attacks. Outside of combat and exploration, Faraday can further his relationship with the mysterious princess of the land and also build up the settlement of Oaktide as he rescues more of his crew. Faraday can also equip different hats from the hat maker that can give him different abilities. One helps you leech life from enemies, one spews out acid, and so on. Exploration is somewhat freeform. Faraday finds maps in the world and can hand these to the boatman to find new islands to explore, looking for keys or missing crew members. Traversal with the harpoon is a lot of fun. I love teleporting about the place, pinning enemies from a distance only to appear right beside them a moment later. Combat and exploration are enjoyable. Boss fights can get a little hectic and difficult to understand with a lot going on. One thing I would like to see is some way of knowing if you have missed items or crew in an area. While there is an overworld map that highlights important items, there is no map when you are on an island. I am enjoying my time with Olija and getting to know more about the lands and interacting with NPCs in downtime, and also whizzing about the place with the harpoon. Olija is available on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. Oh boy. This is Gods Will Fall, developed by Clever Beans and published by Deep Silver. Gods Will Fall is an isometric dungeon crawler. In Gods Will Fall, you play 8 random survivors washed up on the shore of a strange island. A large fleet of people set out to challenge the gods of this world for being huge dickheads. However, the gods sent a great storm and now only 8 of you remain. You are now tasked with slaying the 10 gods on this island, one by one, in any order you wish. You can choose from any of your 8 random characters to tackle a dungeon. Each character is randomly generated at the beginning of the game. They can spawn with different weapons, which have their own moveset, or different body sizes, which can move faster or tank through enemies' attacks. And some characters may spawn with a random skill. Once a character is chosen for the dungeon, they are locked in to that dungeon until the god at the end is defeated. If that character dies, they are stuck in that dungeon until another character can complete the dungeon, at which point they will be freed. Successfully completing a dungeon can award new weapons, stat boosts, and skills for the completing character, and minor stat boosts for benched characters. The game also tracks individual character stories and progressions. Some characters might have beef with one god in particular, and should they challenge that god, they may find their stats being diminished during the dungeon, but receive a larger boost on completion. Similarly, if a character has failed a number of times, or you are using a character too often, they may become fatigued or despondent, reducing their stats in turn. I really like the game's setting. It has a cool Celtic aesthetic and some faux Irish-Scottish god names that I appreciated. Each god's dungeon is unique. One is reminiscent of a forge, one is the sea in a storm, another is a decaying forest, and so on. I did have some issues with Gods Will Fall. The game is a roguelike, Once all 8 characters are dead, you have to start over. Unlike other modern roguelikes, you carry nothing across to subsequent runs. You start over with 8 brand new random characters. The only difference between your very first run and every run after is that the tutorial is missing. Dungeon difficulties are also randomized, and you are given no way of knowing how hard a dungeon will be before committing a character to it. This can result in you losing one of your better characters to a very difficult dungeon early on. Additional to this, I was able to complete the game on my first run. This is kind of a problem for a rogue style game, as I was left with little reason to do another run. Combat is also clunky, characters are slow to respond, hitboxes seem unfairly biased towards hindering the player, and the parry timing is far too variable. The bloodlust and roar mechanic of turning damage and combos into health and damage boosts is interesting and does keep the player engaged in combat, rather than trying to run away to heal. However, enemy stun locking can prevent the player from actually healing themselves, which is very frustrating. The gods have cool designs, but the fights with them often turn into slapfests. I often found myself just flailing at the boss and hoping my bloodlust would keep me alive, and it usually worked. Gods Will Fall has some interesting mechanics around character story and progression, allowing characters to build and bond over their failures and accomplishments. I would have liked to have seen a dedicated set of 8 characters for the game rather than a random bunch, as it is difficult to build any connection with them. Ultimately, there are a lot of good ideas here, but the execution is flawed. I would like to see another iteration on some of these mechanics in future, but for now, I can't recommend it. Gods Will Fall is available on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. This is Cyber Shadow, developed by Mechanical Head Studios and published by Yacht Club Games. Cyber Shadow is an old-school side-scrolling action platformer, similar to the older Shinobi and Ninja Gaiden games. In Cyber Shadow, you play as Shadow, a ninja turned cyborg pulled out of stasis to rescue the master of their clan from some evil robot doctor guy. It's not really important, don't worry about it. What follows then is a traditional gauntlet of levels taking you from the outskirts to the center of Mecha City. Initially, Shadow is weak coming out of stasis, only having their sword and limited health. As such, early levels are fairly traditional platformer fare. Enemies are well placed to annoy and frustrate you, but fall after a couple of slashes. Rescuing your clan members grants you new tools and abilities, such as shuriken or a fiery uppercut. Eventually, you will be introduced to more difficult levels where you will need to dash across gaps, wall slide, and pogo jump from enemy to enemy. Levels are well designed with a lot of fun platforming sections. There's a huge variety of enemies, all requiring their own tactics to defeat. The battles with the humanoid bosses are also challenging, but a lot of fun. I am finding Cyber Shadow to be a bit of a frustrating play. It has a number of features from older action platformer titles that are personal bugbears of mine, namely knockback on damage and damage on contact, both resulting in annoying deaths. I personally hate both of those, but I understand they are a hallmark of these kinds of games. They are my chief source of frustration with the game, and I am finding it difficult to continue playing because of them. The game is really well made, and I can see, even without my personal frustrations, that it is an excellent spiritual successor to the type of game it is trying to emulate. An excellent game, if you can put up with the frustrations of that era of game design. Cyber Shadow is available on PC, PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Nintendo Switch.
Now what you gonna do? You're kinda stuck over there now, huh? Maybe you should have thought about that before attacking me. Dickhead.
This is The Pedestrian, developed and published by Skookum Arts. The Pedestrian is a 2.5D puzzle game. You take control of a pedestrian symbol and navigate the world by moving through different street signs and whiteboards and notepaper and various other flat objects. Ostensibly, you are collecting different pieces of some device that looks a whole lot like an old Game Boy. But that's not really important. The game is really a series of different puzzles where the background and theme change every now and then. Most puzzles present you with a number of disconnected tiles and you are tasked with navigating your pedestrian symbol from the start to the exit. These puzzles have some rules that make things a bit more restrictive and structured. A tile cannot be connected to itself, a tile exit has to match an entrance on another tile, and finally, if you break a connection that has been used, the puzzle will reset. Puzzles start out simple enough, eventually more mechanics are added, such as carrying objects from one tile to another, connecting power from the outside world to the tile, and eventually selectively freezing specific tiles. There are also simpler traversal segments in between more involved puzzles, where you move your pedestrian to the next location, interacting with the outside world along the way, clicking elevator switches, or entering numbers on a numpad. The Pedestrian is a chill puzzle game with a really nice presentation that does a good job of disguising the esoteric nature of the puzzles underneath. I did not understand the narrative wrapping the game, but I don't think it's necessary to do so. The main draw is the puzzles, and I enjoyed scratching my head for a bit and figuring them out. The Pedestrian is available on PC, PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Nintendo Switch. Fuck it, can I not just break this? Can I not just connect that? No. Not you. You go away. I connected you to... Ah, what? Okay. Okay, that's fine. Those are some of the games I played for January 2021. Difficult to pick a standout, really. Cyber Shadow is a lot of fun, but I am frustrated by it just because of general annoyances. I'm dying too much and it's pissing me off. Olija also I'm getting a lot of fun out, it's just I feel like I'm missing half the game sometimes. I don't know if it's the kind of game where you go back later on to check if you've missed something, but I do get the feeling that I keep missing stuff. The Pedestrian is a great, chill puzzle game. I really liked it. I kind of just wish there was a bit more to it than just the puzzle stuff. Gods Will Fall. I went on for a good bit actually in this video about Gods Will Fall despite me not recommending it. It's just, it has some really good ideas and I just feel like they're attached to a not great execution of those ideas, that's all. Next month we'll be looking at Little Nightmares 2, which I played a demo of already. It's on the channel if you want to check that out. We'll just be looking at the full game. We'll be looking at Persona 5 Strikers, or Persona 5 Scramble, depending on where in the country or where on the planet you are, which is kind of like the Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, what it did for Legend of Zelda. Persona 5 Strikers is what it's doing for Persona 5. It's a 1v1000 with the Persona 5 cast. Also be checking out Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Super Mario 3D World is kind of your standard side-scrolly Super Mario game. I imagine it will be really good because those games, even when they're bad, they're still pretty good. Bowser's Fury looks like it looks like a kind of strange sandbox version of a 3D Mario game, which is interesting, and I'm interested to see what they do with it. Finally, we'll be looking at Atelier Ryza 2, that has a subtitle that I can never remember, but anyway, which is a sequel to Atelier Ryza 1, which is all about alchemy, JRPG, anime shit that I like. And hopefully I'll like this one too. Elsewhere on the channel, weekly news continues to happen weekly. Games of February will hopefully be quicker, although Atelier Ryza is a big JRPG, so it might take me a while to get through all of that, or at least a decent amount before I can really talk about it. Anyway, let me know what you thought about this month's games, or next month's games, or anything that's on the channel. You can find me on Twitter, or just comment underneath the video, that works too. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you next time.